7 manipulation tactics used daily, and how to spot them.
Every single day, people are trying to influence you. Some do it subtly, others do it aggressively. Most of the time, you do not even notice it happening. Manipulation rarely looks evil in the beginning. It usually appears harmless, polite, emotional, or even caring. That is what makes it dangerous. The most effective manipulators do not force people, they guide emotions. They shape perception. They quietly control reactions while making their target believe every decision was their own idea. Human beings are emotional creatures before they are logical ones. We like to believe we make rational decisions, but psychology repeatedly shows that emotions drive behavior far more than logic does. Fear, guilt, validation, insecurity, loneliness, urgency, approval, and social pressure can all be weaponized against you. And once someone understands your emotional weak points, they no longer need to overpower you physically. They can control you mentally. The frightening part is that manipulation is not limited to toxic relationships or criminal minds. It happens in friendships, workplaces, dating, family conversations, politics, social media, advertising, and even everyday interactions. Some people manipulate intentionally, others do it unconsciously because they learned it from the environments they grew up in. Either way, the result is the same. Your emotions become tools for someone else's advantage. Most people only recognize manipulation when it becomes extreme, but manipulation is often subtle. It hides in tone of voice, timing, silence, compliments, fake concern, selective kindness, and emotional pressure. The smartest manipulators rarely look aggressive. In fact, many appear calm, charming, intelligent, or emotionally wounded. They understand one terrifying truth about human psychology. People lower their guard around what feels familiar. And this is why awareness matters. Once you can identify manipulation in real time, its power weakens instantly. Manipulation survives through confusion. It depends on hesitation, emotional overload, and self-doubt. The moment you recognize the pattern, you regain control of your mind. Here are 7 manipulation tactics used daily and exactly how to spot them before they control you.
Gaslighting, making you doubt your own reality. Gaslighting is one of the most psychologically destructive manipulation tactics because it attacks your perception itself. Instead of directly controlling your actions, the manipulator slowly makes you question your memory, judgment, emotions, and understanding of events. Over time, the victim becomes mentally dependent on the manipulator's version of reality. It often begins subtly. You confront someone about something hurtful they said, and instead of taking responsibility, they respond with phrases like, "You're overreacting, that never happened," or "You always misunderstand everything." The goal is not to solve the issue. The goal is to destabilize your confidence in your own perception. What makes gaslighting dangerous is repetition. One isolated incident may seem harmless, but repeated often enough, it creates psychological confusion. You start replaying conversations in your head. You second-guess your instincts. You apologize for things you were not wrong about. Eventually, you stop trusting yourself entirely. Gaslighting works because humans naturally seek certainty. When someone repeatedly challenges your reality with confidence, especially someone emotionally close to you, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance. Part of you senses something is wrong, but another part wants to preserve emotional harmony. That internal conflict weakens your ability to think clearly. Manipulators know that confused people are easier to control. A person who trusts their instincts is difficult to dominate, but a person trapped in self-doubt becomes emotionally dependent on external validation. One major sign of gaslighting is that you constantly feel mentally exhausted after conversations with a certain person. You leave interactions questioning yourself more than before. Another sign is when someone consistently rewrites history to avoid accountability. Facts become flexible depending on what benefits them emotionally. To protect yourself from gaslighting, pay attention to patterns, not isolated excuses. Trust repeated behavior over emotional explanations. Write things down if necessary. And most importantly, stop automatically assuming that confidence equals truth. Manipulators often speak with certainty, precisely because certainty intimidates people into silence. Guilt tripping. Controlling you through obligation. Guilt is one of the strongest emotional weapons in human psychology. Most people want to feel like good human beings. Manipulators understand this deeply. Instead of directly demanding control, they trigger guilt to pressure you into compliance. Guilt tripping often sounds emotional rather than aggressive. After everything I've done for you, I guess I just care more than you do. Fine, don't worry about me. These statements are carefully designed to make you feel selfish for having boundaries. The manipulator does not necessarily need to prove you were wrong. They only need to make you feel emotionally uncomfortable enough to surrender. And because humans are wired to avoid guilt and social rejection, many people give in simply to restore emotional peace. This tactic is especially effective against empathetic individuals. Caring people naturally want to help others. But manipulators exploit that compassion by turning kindness into obligation. Over time, the victim begins prioritizing other people's emotions at the expense of their own mental well-being. One reason guilt tripping works so effectively is because society often glorifies self-sacrifice. People are praised for always being available, always understanding, always forgiving. Manipulators weaponize this conditioning. They frame your boundaries as cruelty and your independence as betrayal. But healthy relationships do not require emotional blackmail. Real respect allows room for disagreement without punishment. If someone consistently makes you feel guilty for saying no, setting limits, or prioritizing yourself, that is not love. That is emotional control disguised as emotional vulnerability. You can spot guilt manipulation by observing whether someone respects your boundaries without making you feel morally defective for having them. A healthy person may feel disappointed, but they will not repeatedly weaponize emotional suffering to force compliance. The moment you stop fearing guilt, manipulative people lose enormous power over you.
This brings us to number 3, love bombing, overwhelming you with intensity. Not all manipulation begins with pain. Some begin with excessive affection. Love bombing is when someone overwhelms you with attention, praise, validation, gifts, or emotional intensity very early in a relationship. At first, it feels incredible. You feel chosen, seen, special. The manipulator creates the illusion of deep emotional connection before genuine trust has even had time to develop. This tactic is common in toxic relationships, but it also appears in friendships, workplaces, and even cult-like social groups. The manipulator studies your emotional needs and mirrors exactly what you want to hear. They may say things like, "I've never met anyone like you," "We're exactly the same," or "I feel like I've known you forever." The speed is the warning sign. Healthy emotional bonds develop gradually. Manipulation often rushes intimacy because emotional dependence creates vulnerability. The dangerous part comes later. Once attachment is formed, the manipulator often withdraws affection unpredictably. Suddenly, the warmth disappears, the attention fades. The emotional inconsistency creates anxiety inside the victim, who now works harder to regain the validation they once received freely. Psychologically, this creates a reward and punishment cycle, similar to addiction. The brain becomes hooked on intermittent emotional rewards. The victim keeps chasing the return of the original affection, even while being mistreated. To spot love bombing, pay attention to pacing. Genuine connection respects time. Manipulation often tries to accelerate emotional closeness unnaturally fast. Be cautious of people who become intensely attached before they truly know you.
Intensity is not always sincerity. Sometimes it is strategy.
Number 4 is playing the victim, escaping accountability. Some manipulators maintain control not through dominance, but through helplessness. Victim manipulation happens when someone constantly portrays themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, or emotionally damaged to avoid responsibility for their behavior. Whenever conflict arises, they redirect attention toward their suffering instead of addressing the actual issue. You confront them about lying, disrespect, or harmful behavior, and suddenly the conversation becomes about how hard their life is, how everyone abandons them, or how emotionally broken they feel. The original problem disappears. Now you feel guilty for even bringing it up. This tactic works because humans naturally empathize with suffering. Most people do not want to appear cruel towards someone in pain. Manipulators exploit this empathy to escape consequences. One major sign of victim manipulation is the inability to have balanced accountability. Somehow, every conflict becomes someone else's fault. They are always misunderstood, always unlucky, always the injured party. Even when they hurt others, they quickly reposition themselves as the true victim. This creates emotional exhaustion because you constantly feel responsible for managing their emotional state. Instead of resolving issues, you spend your energy comforting the very person who caused the problem. Healthy people can acknowledge pain while still accepting accountability. Manipulative victims use pain as a shield against accountability itself. Never confuse emotional suffering with moral innocence. Someone can be wounded and still manipulative.
Number 5. Silent treatment. Punishment through withdrawal. Silence can communicate more control than words ever could. The silent treatment is a manipulation tactic where someone intentionally withdraws communication, affection, or emotional responsiveness to punish another person. The goal is not space for healthy reflection. The goal is emotional discomfort. Humans are deeply social creatures. Rejection activates pain centers in the brain, similar to physical injury. Manipulators understand this instinctively. By creating emotional distance, they trigger anxiety, insecurity, and fear of abandonment. The victim often responds by apologizing excessively, chasing validation, or abandoning their own needs just to restore connection. That is exactly the point. What makes the silent treatment psychologically powerful is uncertainty. The victim does not know how long it will last, what exactly caused it, or how to fix it. The brain becomes trapped in emotional hypervigilance, desperately searching for ways to restore harmony. Healthy communication involves expressing the need for temporary space respectfully. Manipulative silence is different. It is cold, strategic, and emotionally punishing. It creates fear rather than understanding. One clear sign is inconsistency. Manipulators often become silent specifically when they do not get their way. Communication becomes conditional. Affection becomes transactional. People who truly care about you seek resolution. People who seek control weaponize emotional withdrawal.
Number 6. Fear and urgency, pressuring you into fast decisions. Manipulators know that rushed people think emotionally, not critically. That is why fear and urgency are used constantly in advertising, toxic relationships, politics, scams, and social pressure. The moment someone removes your ability to think calmly, your decision-making quality drops dramatically. You hear phrases like, "act now before it's too late," "you're running out of time," or "if you really cared, you'd decide immediately." These tactics bypass logic by triggering emotional panic. Fear narrows perception. Under stress, the brain focuses on immediate relief rather than long-term consequences. Manipulators exploit this biological survival response. One reason emotionally stable people are difficult to manipulate is because they tolerate discomfort long enough to think clearly. They do not allow pressure alone to dictate decisions. Manipulators hate patience because patience creates clarity. Clarity exposes emotional tricks. Whenever someone pressures you to make an important emotional decision immediately, pause. Real opportunities usually survive reflection. Manipulation depends on urgency because urgency weakens analysis.
If someone becomes angry simply because you asked for time to think, that alone reveals their true intentions.
Now, the seventh point. Flattery and validation. Winning control through ego. Not all manipulation feels negative. Some of it feels amazing. Flattery manipulation works by feeding someone's ego, insecurity, or desire for approval in order to influence their behavior. Compliments become psychological leverage. Humans crave validation. We want to feel admired, respected, attractive, intelligent, important. Manipulators recognize this emotional hunger and use it strategically. A manipulative person may excessively praise you before asking for favors, gaining trust, lowering your guard, or influencing decisions. The compliments are not always fake. The problem is the hidden intention behind them. This tactic becomes especially dangerous when someone only validates you in ways that make you emotionally dependent on their approval. Over time, your self-worth becomes tied to their perception of you. One major sign is inconsistency. Manipulators often alternate between praise and withdrawal. They build your confidence, then subtly damage it, then restore it again. This creates emotional dependence because the brain begins chasing external validation. Confident people are harder to manipulate because they do not desperately need approval to feel secure. But insecure people often ignore red flags simply because someone made them feel special. The solution is not rejecting compliments. The solution is emotional independence. Accept appreciation without becoming addicted to it. Because the moment someone controls your need for validation, they begin controlling your behavior.
In conclusion, manipulation succeeds when awareness fails. Most people imagine manipulation as something dramatic and obvious, but real manipulation is usually subtle, emotional, and socially intelligent. It hides inside everyday conversations, relationships, workplaces, and online interactions. The truth is uncomfortable. Many people are not interacting with your mind. They are interacting with your emotional triggers. They study what makes you feel guilty, insecure, validated, fearful, or attached, and then they use those emotions strategically. But awareness changes everything. Once you recognize manipulation patterns, you stop reacting automatically. You begin observing behavior instead of absorbing it emotionally. You stop confusing intensity with sincerity, guilt with morality, silence with power, or charm with honesty. Emotionally intelligent people are not those who trust everyone. They are those who can recognize hidden motives without losing their own humanity.